Hi, Facebook live stream viewers. So glad to have you here. Today you are backstage on Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. We have a very wonderful show for you today, and I'm so glad you're with us because I'm going to be interviewing Deb Hipp, who is a journalist who does a lot of writing about elder care, about what to do when you have that parent who's dealing with some kind of a health crisis or a loss of a spouse or something else that has put them in a tough position. What do we do? How do we help them? We're going to be talking about that with Deb in just a little bit. All right, so thanks for being with us. We're just getting ready to start this show. Okay, good. Thank you, Todd. Welcome to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. So glad you're here today because we've got an amazing show. I'm calling the show A Place for Mom. That's actually the name of a very important blog that is dealing with a very important topic that's so relevant today. Where are the senior parents of approximately 74 million baby boomers, about 22.9% of the U.S. population? Where are they going to live when the death of a spouse or health challenges or financial issues or something like that comes into their lives? We'll be talking about that today. I actually am in that group, but I am one of the lucky few whose parents are still married, still healthy, and living happily together. But many, many other people in my baby boomer age group are having to help parents and help them know how to deal with issues like grieving the loss of their spouse, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, strokes, heart problems, and a myriad of other ailments that can put a person in a position of requiring care. Today, my guest, Deb Hipp, is going to be sharing her expertise both personally and professionally in this area. She's a freelance writer who contributes to Huffington Post, A Place for Mom, Forbes, among many other prestigious publications. She's got a lot to teach us and a lot to say. So please stay with us so you can hear her story and her wisdom. We'll be talking to Deb in just a little while. So I want to welcome you all to our show, those of you who listen every week and those of you who may be new. I'm Paula Shaw. I'm an author, a speaker. I'm a life transitions expert. So my work as a life transitions therapist usually has me helping people who are dealing with the upheaval of change. As we've said many times before, we humans have this love-hate relationship with change. You know, we need change so we don't get bored and so we keep on growing. And yet we really don't like the discomfort of it. And so people come to see me in my private practice to get help with working with that upheaval because it can show up in so many different ways. Sometimes it shows up in anger. Sometimes it shows up in sadness. Sometimes it shows up in fear and frustration. It can show up in so many different ways. It can become phobias or addictive patterns. So my work is all about helping people to deal with that disruption in their lives that comes when change comes along. And I love what I do, and especially if people are open to it, I use a lot of mind-body tools. I use the tools and methods of energy psychology, which may include things like tapping meridian points, working with the energy centers, working with the subconscious mind. I love many of the tools from neuroscience, which can be as simple as looking at something that's bothering you and yawning. Yes, we've learned some really interesting tools from the field of neuroscience. So I find that when I work with clients on that level, and we put more emphasis into bypassing the conscious mind and working more with the subconscious, people tend to heal their issues much more quickly than they do if we're just doing talk therapy and only working with the conscious mind. Because as we've been taught in recent years, the conscious mind, this frontal cortex part of what's going on, that's only 5% of the mind functioning. 95% is subconscious. 95% is running the show. And we're trying to change the show with 5%. It's like a flea fighting an elephant, you know? So what we try to do is work with the tools that have been taught to us in mind-body methods and energy psychology. If you want to learn more about how I do work with people in my private practice, or just more about the work that I do, you can find that information on paulashaw.com. That's paulashaw.com. And if you'd like to learn more about this radio show, Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw, then you can go to changeitupradio.com. That's changeitupradio.com. On that website, you can hear past episodes, and we've had some amazing guests on this show. You also can get information about sponsoring this show or being a guest on this show. So please check us out at paulashaw.com and changeitupradio.com. And of course, we have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, we're on Twitter, we're everywhere. So if you want to get more information about us, or if you want to just stay in touch, then please also look for us on social media. One of the things that I'm talking a lot about these days is my new book, Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say. I'm very excited about this book. It's a little book with a big punch. That's how I like to speak about it, because so often in life, we get into situations where the conversation is difficult for one reason or another. Maybe it's an employee that has to be reprimanded, or maybe it's a family member who's gone through some kind of a loss or a bad health diagnosis. Maybe it's a friend who went through a breakup. You know, life is constantly in flux, and a change throws us off. So those conversations become difficult to have. We tend to avoid them because we're scared to death that we might say the wrong thing and make it worse. And we just don't want to damage a friend. We want to support them, but it often puts us in a very uncomfortable situation. And we humans love comfort. We love the familiar. So it's difficult to have those conversations that are tough. And that's why I wrote this book, because too many times I've heard people say, no one brought it up. No one talked to me about it. And of course, that makes people feel isolated and uncared about. But what I know is that that's usually not the case at all. It's just that the person who would really like to support is just feeling uncomfortable, just feeling inadequate. And so I'm telling you, you can't imagine how many things can come up and how busy you can be. So it's just not possible to make that call. It's just not possible to go ahead and talk to that person. I've been through it myself many a time. I've even told the story on myself that when I had a dear friend, and this woman was my best friend, she lost a pregnancy. She had a miscarriage. And I was there. I was there to take her to lunch and to tell her the latest that was going on and to chat with her. But I didn't talk to her about her pain. And months later, when I finally said to her, what was the worst part of the whole thing? She said, no one brought it up. And I didn't want to bring it up and bum everybody out. So I just never was able to talk about it and process my pain. And I was the guilty one on that one. I was on the top of the list. So I decided I was going to write this book so that I could help other people. I actually have lists in this book of things that are helpful to say and things that are not helpful to say. And if you're the person in the position of being the one who's hurting, I have lists of things that you can say too when people say things that either upset you or hurt you or that just feel kind of inane and ridiculous. So saying the right thing when you don't know what to say is available on Amazon. And I truly do just love this book, and it's getting great reviews. People who read it are contacting me left and right and saying, I love it. I just love it. And I was able to read it in one sitting. I keep it in my purse or I keep it in my glove box. And that's exactly what I hoped for when I wrote this book. One of the things I want to also discuss today is there are 5 steps in the book, 5 steps to successful communication. Step 1 is setting the right intention. Step 2 is being present. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. First, I'll tell you the other 3 steps. Step 3 is having the right mindset of supporting and comforting, not judging and not teaching, not correcting. Step 4 is listening with the intent to hear, really listening. And step 5 is respond briefly from the heart. It's a connection that people feel. So anytime you're having an important conversation, really any conversation, consciously be present. It will make a huge difference. All right, we'll be back to answer some emails after this message. Be right back. All right, live stream viewers, we are just getting ready now for answering emails, and I'm going to put my headset on here so I can hear my sound engineer, Todd. Todd, are you there? Hello. Oh, I can't hear you. Let me see where I'm plugged in.
Hello.
Say it again.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can now. Yeah, now I made it too loud. Okay, try again.
Hello.
Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right.
All right, I'm going to take a little sip of water. And we will bring this thing back. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. Delighted to have you with me today. And in this segment, we are going to be answering some emails from people who are contacting me these days because they want help with saying the right thing when you don't know what to say. All right, Todd.
Yes, Paula.
Can you read our first email, please?
Sure. The first one reads, Dear Paula, my father is in his early 80s, and he has recently got engaged to a woman in her late 60s. My brother and sister and I think he is making a mistake, as my mother just died a little over a year ago, and we don't think he is really over her. We're also worried that this woman just wants his money. What do we say to him to save him from making a big mistake? Signed, Monica.
Ooh. Well, Monica, this is an issue that actually happens a lot. And let me give you a little bit of background information that might help you understand what your dad is probably doing. First of all, more often than not, women outlive men these days. But most men, especially the age of your dad, they have been alive during a time when a woman took care of them. A woman was a very important part of their life. You know, when they were working, they usually came home and she had dinner ready. She was in charge of the children. It was a different time. And so men become much more dependent on having that female presence around. And when they lose that woman that in many cases they might have spent most of their adult life with, that is really a debilitating loss. Every single day of their life, they're feeling that loss. There isn't that same person there to cook their meals, to do their laundry, to talk with them, to accompany them to a doctor's appointment or to the grocery store. I shared earlier that I'm really one of the very lucky few in my age range, because my parents have been married since my mother was 18 and my dad was in his early 20s. So they're a typical example of a couple that have spent their entire adult lives together. So when this is the case, it's very difficult for one of those spouses when the other one leaves the earth, when they transition out of this life. And your father may have been suffering way more than you were even aware of. He might have been very lonely. He might have just felt like he didn't even know who he was without the presence of a woman around him. So if he seems happy, and if he really seems to have taken time to get to know this woman, and if she loves him and is comfortable with the age difference, which could be 10, obviously it's more than 10 years, a bit more, but I certainly have known many couples with that kind of an age difference that were just fine. I mean, in many cases, she is actually looking at more prospect of ending up being a caregiver because he is older. So my hope is that she's marrying him because they found something special together. And very often it happens with older people that they don't take months and years of courtship because they know that they're on the back end of their life. And if they enjoy each other and they enjoy being together, they're ready to just take it to the next step. So I don't necessarily think this woman's a gold digger or that your father's making a mistake. He may be just trying to fill some emptiness in his life, and he found happiness with this woman who could very well be the energy and the inspiration and the joy that will actually help him live longer and be healthier and clearly be happier. So, obviously y'all want to be keeping an eye on what's happening there. And I hope you've really made an effort to get to know her. But I wouldn't necessarily stand in the way of this union happening. If your dad seems happy, and sit down with him alone, talk to him alone, and see what his motivation is. What are his reasons for wanting to marry this woman? But if that he's happy with her and that he loves her, then I would give them your blessing and just be happy for them. Because once the spouse is gone and there are all those hours of alone time in the home, you can't replace that. You can't be there for him during all that time. You've got your own life to live. So if he's found a companion that gives him joy, bless him and hope that it works really well. All right. Thanks for your letter.
Our next email reads, Dear Paula, my mother has reached a point in her life where my siblings and I feel that she would be much safer in an assisted living facility. She has always said that she will never leave her home and that she'd rather die. We love her and we want her to be happy, but we are truly worried that if anything happens to her, there's no one around. How would you suggest we handle this? This is signed Larry.
Larry, boy, again, this is a situation that is happening more and more now. I'm hearing about something like this, a similar situation, nearly every day, either in my practice or among my friends. There are a lot of older parents, older people, who are dead set that they will never leave their home, that they want to stay in their home and that they'd rather die than go live in some kind of a facility or a home, as they tend to call them. And it's a really difficult thing because you could be right. In fact, I had a client just the other day who was saying that their father had passed out a couple of times, and medically they couldn't seem to find anything wrong with him. But there he was. He'd passed out, and that can be very dangerous because obviously someone can hit their head or cause further damage to themselves. So I get it. I get it big time that you want her to be safe. I think maybe the best thing to do is, first of all, an assisted living facility. And we're going to be talking about all of this on the show today. So I'm so glad you wrote in. But an assisted living facility actually can be great fun. I've had many clients who've lived in an assisted living facility. And all that means is they have like a really lovely apartment, and the facility provides things for them to do. They provide the food. There's usually a restaurant or cafeteria, whatever they call it. So the food is pretty much taken care of. They have activities. They might have exercise classes, art classes, photography groups. There are all sorts of activities that these people can do. And so it gives them connection with others, which is critical and so often doesn't happen for older people because they might stay held up in their homes if they're not driving or if they're not feeling well. In this way, all they have to do is walk out their door, and there are people around. There are places to go. One of my clients told me that, every afternoon she and her girlfriends would do an exercise class together, and then they'd all go to the restaurant and have a glass of wine and dinner. And it was something she really looked forward to every day. It was that companionship. So it can be such a wonderful opportunity for people, but I think you have to educate yourself about the places, what they provide, and then maybe just have a talk with your mom and just ask her if she'd be willing to go visit a couple of places, just to kind of see what they're like and get a feeling for them with no plan, and letting her know that it will always be her choice.
Can I chime in for a second here, Paula?
Please do, Todd.
Because just recently, in the last year or two, my grandmother, actually it's been about 3 years now, she first moved into an assisted living home, and she was one where she never really wanted to do that, and she's one of the younger residents at that place. And I think one thing that was important was my parents told her, you know what, if you end up not liking this place, we'll find you another place. Because she had all this pressure of, this is where I'm going to be till my last days. And she went to the one, and she ended up not liking it very much. And she moved after we found her another place after a year. And she loves the place she's at now. So I think that's something important, too, to tell them, hey, this doesn't necessarily have to be permanent. Maybe we're going to try to find the best place for you. But if it turns out you don't like it, we'll find you a better place.
Exactly. And then what I also love about that, Todd, is it's still giving them the dignity of choice. It's not saying you have to do this and treating them like a child, because so often that's the part that really bothers the elder person, that they feel like all of a sudden now everybody's treating them like they're a child. They can't think, they can't make decisions for themselves. And of course, sometimes that is the case if they have dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. But I think that's a great point, Todd. Give them a say in it. It's like, take them to a few places and see what feels good. And then, as Todd said, always let them know that this isn't etched in stone. If you're not happy here, just like if you weren't happy in a house you moved into, we'll find one that you like. Because it is important. Every day of our lives is important, but it is important that we're living the end of our life in a place that we feel good in, a place that stimulates us and keeps our mind working sharply, and that makes us want to get up every day. So thank you so much for that input, Todd. That's a really great point. And thank you for your letter, Larry. I hope that was helpful. All right, and now what we've been waiting for, we are going to be talking in just a few moments with Deb Hipp, a journalist who actually specializes in writing about elder care and these kinds of issues that we're calling today A Place for Mom. All right, we'll be right back with Deb Hipp. So Facebook live stream listeners, we're getting Deb on the phone. She is going to be a phone guest today, and I'm going to look for her bio.
All right, Paula, Deb Hipp is on the phone.
Okay. Hi, Deb.
Hi, Paula. How are you today?
I'm just great today. I'm just fine. I'm so delighted to have you with me. So we are actually live streaming right now on Facebook on our Change It Up Radio Facebook page. And so in just 1 minute, I am going to start the next segment and bring you on. So if you're ready.
Great.
Okay, all set?
Okay, thanks, Paula. All right.
Okay, here we go. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. We are about to start the segment we've all been looking forward to because I am bringing on my guest, Deb Hipp, and she is a Kansas City, Missouri-based freelance writer who covers elder care and caregiving issues and has more than 20 years of experience as a journalist and a writer. In fact, she was interviewing me last week for a piece that she's writing, and we just hit it off so well and had so much in common. I said, oh my goodness, I really want to interview you on the radio show because she has a lot to teach us. She began writing about elder care and aging after her own father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And she hopes that her writing can help others who are going through these kinds of situations and whose lives have been altered by dementia and Alzheimer's. You can find her work at debhipp.com, and we'll be giving you that website again. But she is a wonderful writer and has written for such prestigious publications as A Place for Mom, the blog we were talking about, Forbes magazine, Huffington Post, Next Avenue, and Credit Karma. So, Deb, I am so delighted to have you with me. Welcome.
Hi, Paula. Hi, I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so glad. And I think, Deb, it would be great to open with the explaining to our listeners, how did you get interested in writing about this particular genre?
Well, I've been a writer for about 20 years, and I was freelancing in addition to a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And then when my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2014, that suddenly became a huge focus of mine and my family. And a lot of questions came up for me. And so I started looking into things, reading about long-term care and memory care units, Alzheimer's. I would go to Alzheimer's, read all about Alzheimer's at the Alzheimer's Association.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking into veterans benefits. And then after my father passed away in 2016, early 2016, I had learned so much that I thought, a lot of other people have questions, and I would like to write about, answer their questions and explore these issues in a compassionate way.
I love hearing that, Deb, because I think so many people are affected by issues like a relative or a parent getting Alzheimer's, and they probably are exactly where you were. They're like, oh no, what do we do? What's out there? What's available? So let me just back up for a second and ask you,
okay.
Alzheimer's, if I understand it correctly, it's a progressive disease, right?
Yes, it's actually you could call it a terminal illness because it always leads to death, and it is progressive. It progresses, the person will decline over time, and it actually begins maybe even a couple decades before the symptoms appear.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Right. And it has different stages, and the first one, the first ones are pretty mild cognitive impairment. Someone may be forgetful, but you think, well, maybe it's old age,
Mm-hmm.
or aging. And then, it gets to be more significant. Like the first time I realized that my dad had something seriously wrong was when I went home at Christmas. And, I live 8 hours from my parents.
Mm.
And so I only went home once or twice a year, so you can't really catch it then. But it was at Christmas, and we celebrated Christmas. And the next day, my dad got up and he walked in and he said, "Merry Christmas, everybody!" Like it was Christmas that day. And I was shocked. And then that night, we came back from dinner somewhere, and we pulled in, and he said, "Oh, it looks like we have company," when it was really my car and my brother's car in the driveway. So, anyway,
So you started to see some little cognitive slips that were odd.
They were pretty big. Yeah, they were. But I think that what happens with a lot of people is, sometimes the spouse, they kind of cover for the person.
Yeah.
They want to protect them. Maybe they're in denial. You don't always see what's going on with the person unless you live with them.
And now in that case, you've got a progressive illness that you're dealing with. I actually, similarly, it would be kind of that way with dementia as well, right? At a certain point, the person just is not safe to stay in their home. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, they mingle together, but the difference is that Alzheimer's is a terminal illness. It will eventually lead to the person's death, whereas dementia, not necessarily.
I see what you're saying. Now, I've heard,
but they're both progressive. They're both progressive, and they will get to a point where a person's not safe.
Yeah.
They can't. You see on the news all the time these silver alerts, or somebody wanders off or drives off and is gone for days, or sometimes even found, dead. I mean, it's very worrisome.
Oh, yes, especially if they can't remember where they live or how to get home, or maybe even who they are. And if they leave without ID, I can't imagine how frightening that would be for them and for the family. I have a couple of clients I'm working with right now whose parents have either, I'm not sure if they've been diagnosed with dementia, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is, and not Alzheimer's. But both of them are almost hallucinate. They think that the caregiver is stealing from them. Is that common?
Yes, it's very common. And, someone's personality can change. Well, it will always change. Yeah. But it will really change sometimes drastically. Like someone who was very sweet could become really aggressive and violent. And then that didn't happen with my dad, but one thing that might happen with my dad was he was unable to sleep, and he went over to the neighbor's house at like 2 a.m. and knocked on the door and asked them to turn the teenage son to turn down the stereo. He said that the teenage son was playing Statler Brothers, which is highly unlikely. I don't know if you know the Statler Brothers, but they're way back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he would
kind of progressive too, because you're losing your parent in stages almost. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, it is.
Did you experience anything like that?
I did. I even called, a resource out there, and asked if there was someone who could talk with me about that, but unfortunately they never called back. They're probably just overwhelmed. But with my dad, it was in stages, and he basically lost his personality. His personality was gone. You just see moments of it here and there. Yeah. And he hardly ever talked. And I really honestly, I shed so many tears and cried and felt so sad, because it got to a point where before I knew what was going on with him, I was like, why doesn't my dad ever ask me about my life? Does he not love me anymore? Did I do something? Why does he not? I gave him a birthday gift for his 80th birthday. It was a framed photo of me and my little brother that he took on a fishing trip, holding these fish when we were like 6 and 7. It's a cute picture. He just looked at it and just set it aside, and this was a guy who, when I was a teenager, I'd buy him a really nice sweater for Christmas, and that's what he'd wear over to my grandmother's house every year. Just whatever I bought him. He'd be so proud, Yeah. But anyway, when he died, I was really, really sad. It was sad, and I was sad for a long time, but I was also, there was a relief.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a relief that he didn't have to continue declining, and that we didn't have to make a decision to, like, are we going to have to put him somewhere because he's unsafe? Or
So was he at home the entire time until his
Yeah.
death? Oh.
He was still at home, and he did not forget who I was or who my brothers were.
Mm-hmm.
He never forgot who I was or my brothers, but he just mainly slept a lot. He slept a lot,
Yeah.
and then he would get up in the night and just eat and eat and eat, one time I started to visit much more often, like every 2 months,
Uh-huh.
which was hard to drive that way, and 8 hours each way every
Oof.
2 months. It's kind of a lot.
Yes.
And it was so stressful because my mom she was sort of not. She almost didn't want any help. One of those types.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Resented it, and so it would be very stressful for me to go there.
Mm.
And so one night I was reading a book, just wanting time to myself, and my dad came wandering out, of the bedroom in his pajamas and started eating and just sat down and started telling me this whole story about how his father died when he was 7, which I knew, but he told me every detail of who was in this pickup truck and great detail. And yet he couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Like if he gave me money to buy a pizza, he'd try to give it to me again a minute later. But anyway, my point was that, I really wanted to be alone, but I also knew, like, hey, this is a moment when you can connect with your dad and
Sure.
listen to what he says.
And
I'm
important.
glad I did. And that was really the last, he died 2 months later. I didn't see him again until his funeral.
Deb, we've got to take a break right now, but we will be right back to hear more. That's such an important moment you just described. We'll be right back.
Okay, thanks, Paula.
Okay, Deb, they will be putting the commercials in so we can actually go forward.
Okay, good.
I wanted to ask you if there's, I love this question about what are the greatest lessons you learned in your caregiving experience. Is there any other area that you think that we definitely want to hit on during this next segment? Because as you can see, it goes by fast.
Yeah. Maybe the common themes of caregivers, so that I could just, because they're really all over the place.
Oh yes,
and a lot of people feel guilty for them. Yeah.
So
okay.
Some of the issues that affect caregivers, I think that's a huge topic. Go ahead.
Yeah, or how they feel. Well, there's a lot of issues that could be a long.
Yeah.
So, just go ahead and ask. I'll figure it out as we go.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, dear. Here we go.
Thanks. Mm-hmm. All right.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. We are talking today about elder care. I'm calling this show A Place for Mom because my guest today writes for a blog, a very important blog called A Place for Mom. Her name is Deb Hipp. She's been a journalist for over 20 years, and she writes for some of the most prestigious publications out there. Today, we're talking about elder care. Deb comes to her writing both personally and professionally because she has just shared with us in the last segment how her own experience of living with her dad, who had Alzheimer's and eventually died from Alzheimer's. So Deb, one quick thing I wanted to say about Alzheimer's, and then I'd love to get into talking a little bit about the caregivers, because that's such an important area. So Alzheimer's, you've mentioned twice that it is terminal. And I have heard that's because the brain actually kind of forgets how to function. Is that correct? It forgets how to keep the body going?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Eventually, even the brain, it can just forget the brain just forgets to how to function totally, and the body shuts down.
So even though many people live for a lot of years with Alzheimer's, eventually it's going to kill a person who has it. Is that correct?
Yes. there will be some complication that's related to it. It could be often pneumonia, or they could choke to death. But the thing is, Alzheimer's attacks the brain and the body. Like your vision, it affects the vision.
Oh.
Spatial vision. That's why a lot of people with Alzheimer's or dementia, they don't want to take a shower. My dad had great hygiene, but he stopped taking a shower or shaving because some people they look into the shower and it looks like a cesspool that's going to swallow them up. It's hard to explain, but their vision and their distance measuring is all messed up. But it affects their body a lot.
I see. And so when a person gets to a state like this, obviously they need care. Now, whether that care comes from the spouse and they stay at home, or whether they need to go into some kind of a facility, very often there is professional care needed. Like what you just described, if someone was afraid that their shower, looked scary or looked like a cesspool, then obviously some sort of trained professional to help them take that shower would be helpful or would be needed. So caregivers. Now, your mother ended up being the primary caregiver in your dad's case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, and how was that experience for her? How did she cope?
My mom got really depressed. I think, that's not the happiest story, but it's just the truth.
No, but that's
the
the
really
truth.
Depressed, and she kept taking care of my dad, she was very depressed, and he was depressed, and the depression goes with Alzheimer's too, and it was hard. She couldn't. She used to come visit me, come to my house, and we'd go shopping, and she had to stop that. She couldn't really leave my dad. And yet she wouldn't let someone else come in and take care of him, one of those situations.
And see, so often that's the case, either because of financial reasons or just because a person has a belief that this is their job, their responsibility. And I know in my private practice, I have worked with several people who were caregivers, and depression and discouragement, they almost start to lose their own will to live because they're not having fun. And for the reasons that you describe, you can't be away for long periods of time. Even if you bring somebody in to be with your loved one, oftentimes the loved one is not comfortable when you're not there. And like one of my current clients, if she's gone more than an hour or two, she starts getting phone calls from her husband, even if somebody is with him. So it can be very confining. And, one of the things I often encourage the caregivers to do is, first of all, you've got to take good care of yourself. You have to build into your schedule some way to bring somebody in if you need to go get your hair done, to go shopping and have lunch with the girls or with the guys, to do something other than just caregiving. Now you're writing about this area all the time. What do you suggest to people in this role?
Well, what you just talked about is very true. In fact, many times the caregiver will die first, just from being worn down.
Wow, I didn't know that.
In fact, my mom had health problems, and I really thought she would die first. And then just because she was so worn down, but she takes better care of herself now because she doesn't have that extra stress. But I'm sorry, got off a little bit. What was your question?
Just any other tips that you might give caregivers? We're talking about.
Well, sure. First of all, you need to take care of your health first, because if you can't take care of yourself, if you're not able, you can't take care of the other person. And then you have to take care of your mental health as well. And sometimes you can get what they call a respite volunteer from a local community organization. So you should look in your community under volunteer organizations that deal with seniors, and someone can come to your house for even an hour, while you go to lunch with a friend.
Yes.
Or maybe 2 hours while you go for a walk in the park, or something that would help you to get away, because you have to get away, you know.
Yes.
Otherwise, because it's very overwhelming. And it doesn't, it's really, and on one hand, someone wants to be there to do this, but on the other hand, nobody really wants this to be how their life is.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make the best of it, and that won't happen if you're just in the house all the time.
Oh,
you have to get away
and
take some respite. There are free resources out there, or you can hire someone from an in-home care agency to come out and just sit, once a week.
Yes.
It wouldn't be that much.
I think a lot of people aren't aware that you can do that. You can hire someone for an hour or two. We had a gentleman from Salus Home Care on our show a little while back, and that's what he was saying. Whatever your needs are, they can work around that. So maybe you only need somebody for a couple of hours on a Wednesday afternoon so you can go play bingo or go hang out with the girls at lunch. That can be enough to really kind of renew your desire to live, and help you not feel so overwhelmed.
Right. And think of your friends. And a lot of people, they want to do something. Well, that's something that they can do.
Yes.
That's something they can do. You people in your church, you probably get a ton of people from your church who want to do good. And this would be something good they could do.
That's a great idea, Deb. And, I think a lot of people are afraid to reach out. But friends want to help you. They see what your life has become. And so I think that's a really great idea, to just ask people in your church or people in a book club or some other place that you are, especially if they've known your spouse as well, for them to sit and watch a movie with your spouse or take them for a walk or something. They'd probably enjoy that. And that could be a nice little chunk of time for you to be able to just get away and go to the spa, get a massage. Or, sometimes I highly recommend to the caregivers that they need to seek counseling, because a lot of the people that I'm seeing in my practice, they're going through feelings of guilt, feeling like they're being selfish. They feel like even though they're rightfully discouraged about life and the outlook for their own futures, they feel guilty about it. So they need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, it's very overwhelming. And I mean, sometimes people feel angry, like they were planning to spend their retirement traveling in an RV, and now they're stuck in their house with a spouse who's declining.
Exactly. I think that's a big piece, that you had this dream of what your retirement was going to look like and how it was going to be in the last days with your spouse. And it was going to be about fun. Usually that's what people are thinking. And
we would hope, and it is hard. I would just, I would like to put a gloss on it, but the fact is, it's really, really hard and overwhelming for people. Don't forget, one thing we didn't talk about is that some of the caregivers are the adult children who are pretty much in the prime earning years of their jobs.
Yes,
where they have their own kids with their own problems. Right. And then suddenly this is part of it too. That's a major stressor.
Oh my gosh. And that is such a huge point, Deb. I think we're actually going to have to discuss that on another show. You've got to come back because we're out of time. And that's
a show in itself.
It is. It really is. And it's such a real thing that's going on in life. The working children who have their own children, how do they now handle this as well? Deb, you have opened our eyes about so many things today, and I loved having you on the show. And seriously, we'll have to plan a day in the future when you can come back on and let's talk about the realities for the working children when they have needs to take care of their parents. But thank you so much for being my guest today and bringing your wisdom to us. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and thank you for having me on, Paula. And yes, I'd be happy to come back again. So
All right.
have a great day.
It's
All
a
right.
deal.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. And thank you to our listeners. Thank you, Facebook live stream people, for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Don't forget, you can find us on every major podcast platform and here on AM 1170 and 96.1 FM on Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock. And if you forget all that, just ask Alexa or ask Siri. They'll find us. Change It Up Radio. Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye. All right, Facebook live stream people, thank you for being with us. If any of you have questions, if you have older parents that you have issues with, that you don't know what to do, if you're concerned about what's going on with them, please write to us. We'd love to hear from you. You can either write to Paula at changeitupradio.com or write us a message on Facebook. All right. We look forward to being with you again next week. Bye-bye.